Odie, come on now. Give me one moment, boys. What's going on, boys? Did y'all just hear that press conference right now? I did. We're gonna wait for a couple more people to get in. Also, wait for a couple more people to join. Um, did y'all like what y'all heard? Had a Patrick Storm. Hopefully, Patrick Storm could come in. Um, we're just gonna see what goes on. First, I gotta add someone to to this live stream. I gotta add a turn down for Wild Podcast. My brother, all the way from I believe the UK. Welcome. How's it going? Ooh, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Ooh, no sir. What's going on? What's going on? Everybody, can y'all hear me? Let me know y'all can hear me. Let me know. Let me know. Uh oh.
You hear me now?
How's it going, buddy?
There we go. I think we're not the only one to have microphone issues this evening. I think I wasn't quite sure what was worse tonight, either Cal's pathetic answers or the audio quality. But here, let's get in it, man.
So I was just amazed how bad Cal Mcnair was. Like he dodged every single question that was asked from him. I think a lot of good questions were asked pretty well, and like in regards to his relationships with Jack Easterby, to all the failures that he had. I think he really did not have a good look for himself.
Yeah, it went as expected, I would say. For Cal, he was obviously reading off a teleprompter at the start. Didn't look convincing. He talked about commitment to excellence. He's reached out to Deshaun. He didn't actually say if he'd spoken to Deshaun, so time will tell on that one. He talked about how Caserio had multiple options and talked about how he felt like he had to pull the trigger when he did. But I thought he'd been coached well before he went in. He talked about Patriots South. He touched on Easterby right at the start, but it kind of all went downhill from there, I think.
I think it was funny as soon as he taught, as soon as he stopped reading the teleprompter, he would smile like, "Hey, hey, I got through it."
The best bit was your when you put out the screenshot and he got and somebody spoke over him and he's not used to that, and you saw the inside reaction, I think, to what it looks like as a spoiled billionaire, and that was what that was right there.
I've always had the issue, and then we saw someone else talk about, the thought of nepotism, which you could clearly see here. It just seems like Cal McNair doesn't really care about this team, that he's just there.
I think he does care. I just don't think he knows how to. There was interest in some of his answers or his non-answers that he gave. But the overall emotion or the overall sentiments I took out of it, a couple of things. I thought you saw him quite clearly hold on to the one score game.
Yes.
Obviously, we'll come on to the numerous questions that were posed about a certain individual. But the one score game thing was he kept coming back to that. And the brick by brick, and I've got to say, I laughed when he went, "I've got a big brick right next to me here." I just thought he wasn't equipped to answer questions. You can see why he's not being on a live mic.
He just looks bad
constantly.
Doesn't really do.
He's not capable.
Yeah, no. With all due, I really like the fact that he did come out here. He could have just said, "Hey, like we're gonna, just give you guys Nick Caserio out, and that's it." But he stayed there. He took some, like he took some on the chin. We saw that like he did get frustrated with some of the questions. Kind of got like a little snippy with them. It doesn't look. It just looks bad. But we now know that Jack Easterby is just gonna be here.
Yeah, I don't think that was ever in doubt.
Mm,
The answers, and I think if you really want to get into the heart of how much of a sneaky mother Jack Easterby is, you saw it there. The fact that he'd reached out to Nick Caserio and went through a personal moment, as he described it, with him.
mm-hmm.
He's used that to engineer his relation. I don't care what you think about him. One of these guys that I would almost go as far as saying I wouldn't be surprised in his heart of hearts if Jack Easterby isn't actually religious. It's just all a front to get to the position he wants and get paid. Is getting paid the salary that he's getting paid from this organization. So the fact that he basically burrowed in there with Caserio in advance of him potentially getting anything and kept that connection going as long as he thought was necessary for him. He's effectively he's effectively sealed his future here. I don't know what you thought about the constant questioning though, but it was incessant. And fair play to the media, fair play to Brian Smith, fair play to Brandon Scott, fair play to I think it was Jerome Solomon later on questioning him again, and they kept going back at the topic.
And I love that they did because we have been screaming this from the top that Easterby is a problem. I would have been upset if they didn't bring up Easterby multiple times. One thing I like that Nick Caserio said was like he's gonna go to his roles similar to what he was with New England. We heard Patrick Storm say on the Texas Unfiltered podcast that he's gonna have Jack Easterby in check, and that is what you want now with him coming over here from New England.
Yeah, and it was. Yeah, I think anybody who, if you think a Twitter hashtag, if you think signs on I-10 or whatever that was hanging over the bridge over the highway the other day, is not going to change anything. And I think you've seen that from today's press conference, and we're going to have to get used to the fact he's here. The fact that Cal used a very classic technique of ask somebody a question completely unrelated about their question to you to remove tension. I thought that was interesting. So from that reaction alone, he obviously knows that he felt the tension himself. It was visible on his face. But the fact that it got asked so many times to both Caserio and him, and it was dismissed as he's part of the furniture, effectively. I think people are just going to have to swallow it and get on with it. Really, I can't see any other way unless he steps out of line like he has done in the past. But I wouldn't be surprised if he knows he's got to be on his best behavior if he wants to stay around.
Well, then that makes me feel better because I feel like a lot of fans, are just going to think, well, now Easterby is going to have whatever power he wants to. I don't think so. I really think Nick Caserio wants this to be his, and no doubt that that the future of this team is gonna go through him. That's why we gave him a 6-year contract, which is crazy for me. But I love the idea of him saying like, "This is mine."
Yeah, I struggled to kind of take any overriding takeaways from the whole presser. To be honest, there was good questions asked, but they didn't get the answers. And I think the fact the audio quality was good was not good and by any stretch. It was one. I think the Aaron Wilson second question that he asked about London Fletcher, and you could tell at that point Caserio was padding to try and get it wrapped up because they were going for 45 minutes and that would be it. So I think he felt the pressure. That was obvious, as well as Cal. And I think he obviously knows. There's no mistake now that he knows that there's an issue with everybody in Houston. I thought the Brian Smith one was the best. So right at the start, it almost struck me as some emotion, the fact that he said people are out there saying sell the team, fire Jack Easterby, say you're committed to excellence, but you're clearly not. And that was the best moment of it. I think seconded by Vanessa Richardson.
Yeah, I mean, and the bright spot was obviously Nick Caserio. I thought he did a actually very, very fantastic job answering every question, is really going deep down and actually digging into each one. And not only that, it sounds like the man, knows football. And I think it was cool to see, someone who knowing that he's coming from Patriot system, knowing that the Houston Texans, don't really want that anymore, taking on the challenge and coming here.
Yeah, I think it's interesting for him to get this opportunity. Nothing to do with his CV. I think everybody would agree on his resume rather alone that he is qualified for this role. They're far less qualified current operating GM and personnel executives out there in the league right now. So I think on paper it's a coup for the Texans without a doubt. The issue is I thought he sounded incredibly like Belichick. It was almost eerie at times. Very similar to the way in which O'Brien used to answer questions as well, and a lot of kind of general talk about processes and general talk around certain things. The other bit that I thought he brought up in his own speech, and we've heard Easterby say this as well, doing the next right thing. And both of them said that, paraphrasing, in their opening statements and later on. And I think that, to me, more than the actual direct answers of what Jack's role would be, just showed you that he's in their ear more than anybody would ever want to fathom, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like we're just waiting to see how it happens. So what did you think about, the comments on Deshaun Watson and the comments on J.J. Watt? Deshaun Watson was mentioned a lot, but J.J. Watt really wasn't.
Yeah, that I noted that at the time he asked Caserio, and look, it was effectively his first question, so I wouldn't hold it against him for missing off that detail. But he was asked about two players and only answered the question about one. So that we'll see if that means anything. But certainly it felt like he avoided it. I know Cal, that was the moment Cal tried to jump in and had the hand up because he was getting overheard. But he mentioned that he wants to keep him. So you think maybe from a Cal angle, he'll push for that, and which probably means that's the wrong thing to do if Cal wants it. But yeah, they didn't really talk about any players. I thought when Brian Smith mentioned the Hopkins trade and those points probably could have got pushed on more. I think what somebody didn't ask Nick and Ruben, I thought it should have been about the moves that have been made, the reason why this team are in a hole, the lack of salary cap, the bad contracts were not brought up, and that's a huge part. The salary cap was touched upon, but then if you ask anybody in football, they can give you a general answer about the salary cap. But nobody really pressed them on the bad contracts. Nick Martin, Whitney Merciless, Eric Murray, all these guys that are taking up space for good dollars next year on the cap. They weren't pressed at all. But there was certainly some. He looked very Patriots-esque. He talked well. I don't think he did himself any favors when he said he wasn't a barbecue guy, though.
No, not at all. We love barbecue here.
That's one of the biggest reasons for coming. I think it's definitely not going to be the football in the 21. But overall, I thought he was considering how bad the audio quality is, considering the circumstance in terms of this cloud that has been brought over him by no wrongdoing of his own. But I think what I took out of it, the similarity between Caserio and Cal was there was a touch on guiding, stewardship, faith, all the stuff that is great it's great in isolation, but it's not always necessarily transferable to football. They both share that, and then they both share that with the guy who's feeding them that rhetoric, and it's the pastor come operations executive. So the bit where he mentioned, I think it was the fourth time he got questioned, I tweeted out, I thought that was a bit of a dagger to the heart moment. If you ever thought Easterby wasn't going to be here, then,
and I completely agreed. As soon as you put that out, I said, so it looks like we're stuck on on Easterby. Fine, okay, go back to his role. If he steps out of line, real easy, get rid of him. I think he's gonna have a short leash. I really do. I think that now Nick Caserio really understands that we hate Jack Easterby, but not you didn't kind of get a vibe of where he was leaning towards the head coach. I think I was looking for it, but I just couldn't find out.
I didn't expect it to give anything away. I think at this stage, and we've obviously seen with the rejection of or the decline from Matt Eberflus, there's obviously a change in the way in which these candidates have been approached. I think there's not necessarily been it's been through and they didn't actually touch on that really either, did they? In terms of apart from Cal and his opening statement, that didn't get brought back up in terms of the approach, because they thanked the candidates at the start, But they
He
didn't. I
did.
think they maybe forgot to say thanks to Scott Cohen for them wasting his time, getting him in or booking an interview and then not, and then subsequently cancelling. So they didn't really give anything away, nor did we expect them to. But the point that I thought was most pertinent from that was that they didn't even mention if it would be an offensive or defensive coach, as Aaron Reese pressed them on, didn't he? Instead of, if you get potential turnover at OC if you hire a defensive mind. So they didn't give much away, but I think the whole search now has been turned on its head. So, I've seen a lot of guys in the chat there and shout out, I think rightly, Eric Bieniemy, I think Robert Saleh. These are the guys who, I think Arthur Smith we have applied for, and for me Arthur Smith's the number one, and we can go into that. But in terms of what we think this team needs, but in terms of the best candidates and the best staff, like you and I talked about before, Ruben, I think that the Salah angle definitely shows a vision in terms of staff, but that was obviously with the context that we don't have. That was before we knew the GM, so it's kind of up in the air at the minute. I'm happy for anyone. We can go into individual candidates as long as it's not Gerard Mayo from a linebacker coach straight to a head coach. But I wouldn't, I wouldn't put money against it.
Oh man, I would. I don't think he's anywhere near the Houston Texans. I'm being completely honest. There are real candidates that now you could kind of have a vision of who it might be because of the New England ties. We've talked. There's Brian Daboll, who a lot of people are really high on. I am as well. There's Joe Brady, but as you said, this this whole hiring process has been turned upside down, so it's really in the air. But I think it comes down to those two.
Yeah, I think in all eventuality, you're right. I just somebody put McDaniels in. I think that's been ruled out unequivocally. Mm-hmm. So if that was to happen, I think John McClain would need to retire because he's really hammered that home that he's not going to be McDaniels. But I think the somebody's coming. There's Jack Easterby in the I wouldn't be surprised. But I would not be surprised. But I think there's a big push for Brian Daboll, I think. And look, again, I think that the issue is, and it wasn't touched upon, I suppose, if you don't want to lose your press credentials, you probably wouldn't ask this question. But effectively, you got to remember that Bob Lamont, a super agent, has effectively brokered this. If you go on Bob Lamont's website, the number one client in his website is Jack Easterby, right at the top of the page, proud as punch. And if I was Bob Lamont and I was trying to pick up any prospective coaches, my pitch to them would be, I've managed to get a preacher on an executive board of an NFL team. And if you've got actually genuine football skills, and what do you think I can do with you? And I think that's an easy sell for Bob Lamont. And that guy has effectively power brokered this move along with Easterby, because for anyone that's not necessarily aware, and obviously this is subject to confirmation over time, but the whole idea was that Easterby went and made a power play to Cal, and the decision was made pretty quickly, send a private jet to go and pick him up. Now, supposedly on that same day, Joe Brady was interviewed, and it was a successful interview. I think there is no question about Joe Brady's offensive mind. I think it's more of a question of who the staff he would bring in and what sort of experience he would bring. You basically can't rule anyone out with expatriate ties, but I think, and look, there's at no point would I think that Cal would care about public opinion, because you've seen that today in the clearest form. When even asked about it, it's been sort of dismissed. Probably through lack of skill of answering rather than actually any consideration to the answer he gave. But yeah, I think anybody from an expatriate background has got a chance in this. Yeah, absolutely.
So I actually admire the work ethic of Jack Easterby. Knowing that there's a possibility I lose my job, convinces the owner to send a private jet to go get Nick Caserio. He's one of the hardest working dudes I know.
I heard Lance Sterling put this out at 97.5, and Lance is pretty clued in with the Texans and through the rest of the league through his dad being coach at multiple spots. And he said on the show, I think it was yesterday, he's had it confirmed from numerous sources, that numerous candidates said in their interview in one particular press that, and I don't know which one that was, if it was Trench Kirchner. I don't think it would have been, because he got interviewed after, but one of the things might have been Lewis Riddick. But they said the first thing I will do at this job is fire Easterby, and they made that really clear. And they said I can't take this job unless Easterby's there, and that's been well documented, not necessarily officially, but it would make sense to any football person. So yeah, the fact that he's managed to get one on the search committee, and for Caserio not to even be on the final list of Corn Ferry's top 10 candidates, it just shows you what influence he's got, and by the sound of today, he's going to continue to have that influence.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. It's bad when someone who isn't a head coach, who isn't a GM, gets talked about. I think that's horrible.
The fact, well, I mean, I suppose the old adage is you don't talk about people when they're not there.
Yep.
He's a public figure, and he's signed up for that. The point that I thought was that to get asked about somebody so many times to detract from your day in the sun, if you're Nick Caserio, this is what you've been working for your entire career until this point, and all the people want to do is ask about it. But it shows you how close Easterby was to him. Look, let's not even rule anything out about Jack Easterby being involved in the head coach, and I think that'll even push it towards former ties again. If you gave me the autonomy to hire, for me, I think Arthur Smith. For me, I think if you look at all the stuff he's done well in that offense. Now, a lot of people will say you take out Derrick Henry, that offense isn't the same, and you're right. But when you've got Deshaun, it doesn't really make much of a difference. I'm probably going to come on some of the Deshaun stuff too, but I think when you want to probably throw the ball 65% of the time, you could get a young running back through the draft with juice in his legs to run that outside zone scheme. Now, you'd have to change a couple of the offensive line, particularly the interior, to run that sort of stretch kind of scheme. But if you think about, everybody celebrated Ryan Tannehill, everybody celebrated Deshaun Watson finally throwing 31, 32 touchdowns he ended up in the season. Tannehill had 33 coming into that game. If you think the biggest issue that we had this season was slow starts and in the red zone, both packages and early down scripts of Arthur Smith's scheme are superb. It's probably two of the strongest points: how quickly they start and get points up on the board, and how well they do in the red zone. And so if you take all those three factors into consideration, I think he'd be a perfect match for Watson. And what he currently does not do as well as he could. And I think Arthur Smith's calling of plays and scheme would maybe take Deshaun to another level. And let's be honest, he's got more levels to reach.
Oh, I completely agree. Arthur Smith is someone who, I look at him and I look at him as an enigma. I just got to see what he could do without Derrick Henry. And because Derrick Henry is just a freak, and I mean a freak of nature, amazing running back. But then again, there's times where Ryan Tannehill looks good. They are getting a lot of other players involved, whether it's AJ Brown, whether it's Sean, what's the guy's name? The wide receiver.
You got John Smith, tight end, wide receiver. You got Corey Davis.
Corey Davis, that's what I'm talking about. He's getting all these guys involved. And, Corey Davis was a nobody for the first couple of years. Jonnu Smith himself, he showed flashes, but he's really brought him out. He is an exciting candidate.
Yeah, I often, I mean, that's always the first criticism, you take out Henry. But I think you got to remember that people are kind of used to it now, right? Because you're in sort of year two of Tannehill's resurrection. But this guy was Texas A&M wide receiver, taken, overdrafted by the Dolphins. There was the intangibles, tick the box, a bit like Mitch Trubisky, ticks all the boxes of what you'd look for in your archetypal under center pocket passer. And he's taken his career from the scrap heap, from a trade which was there purely to give depth behind Marcus Mariota, and you bring him in and you've made him a top 10 QB statistically in the league. All of a good run game and play action, don't get me wrong, but if you put a better quarterback in that system, I think you're gonna have similar, if not better, results.
Yeah, I mean, I could agree with you wholeheartedly. Someone who I think is very interesting, I think, is Brian Daboll. I think what he's doing with Josh Allen and company is very good. Josh Allen has steadily gotten better, but he took a huge step forward, this year. A lot of people, if you ask like a lot of Bills people, they think he's the MVP of the league.
Yeah, I
Because
mean,
he's similar like Deshaun. He could throw, and they could both run. I love Brian Daboll.
yeah, I mean, we saw him calling plays in the playoffs last year. I think the big thing for me is obviously this Easterby connection. But now that we know we have to make our bed with that, I think you probably have to put that to one side and just assess him purely as a candidate, like we've had to do with Nick Caserio. His evolution, similar to we're talking about Arthur Smith, the evolution of what he's taken Josh Allen, who a guy coming from Wyoming was not able to play at the playoffs at a level that required it. You saw his brain explode in the fourth quarter last season. Some of the plays where he tried to throw it long across the field to the fullback, the lateral, all those kind of plays. It just showed you the moment was too big for him, and that's because he's probably only played in front of a handful of fans most of his career. A small-time school wasn't mentally there. Now, the bit that sticks out for me is that every coach and every scout in draft evaluations for the entirety of time have said you can't improve accuracy. Josh Allen has improved his accuracy from 53 to get it almost to 70%. So to do that in an off-season now, I know he's working with Carson Palmer's his brother, but as a QB coach, and he credits him with the improvement of that area of his game. But I think he having that number one receiver in Stefan Diggs, you've seen that take the step up. We don't necessarily have that one dominant dog that we can put in that scheme, so that scheme's benefit from that. But I think you've got to understand that there was a big jump there from the quarterback, and now you could say, well, he's been given a quarterback that now makes him able to run that scheme effectively. The bit that I go back to is he had to go to the Nick Saban effectively rehabilitation program that he takes coaches, and I think O'Brien might be joining that list this offseason. He had to go back there. He was an offensive coordinator in 2001 and didn't make it back until the last few years. So there's a reason why he was kind of pushed out. And look, I mean, there's all unfair hires in this league. So you can maybe take that with a pinch of salt, but there's a lot of unfair hires. He didn't get a hire for a long time, didn't get a look in a pro franchise. It's only now been a good situation under Brandon Bean, great general manager, Sean McDermott from the Andy Reid trees coming and giving a stable basis for him to go and coach. I think probably the biggest thing about it is Deshaun, Ruben. I don't know what you think, but they've got to have appeased Deshaun. I think a lot of people have said, look, you appease him by giving Eric Bieniemy a view. I don't know if they're just put off by his rap sheet, which is pretty lengthy.
As far as his rap sheet goes, I think everyone deserves a second chance. And whatever you do, I just don't think the Houston Texans should go that route. Is just because I got him mad, I just got to do whatever it is to please him. I think you still need to sit down and have the conversation. Who is the best coach for you? And looking at the list of Patriots coaches from that are possible, I don't know which one that would make Deshaun happy. We know that he liked Eberflus. He spoke highly on Eberflus, and Eberflus says, "I'm not going to interview no more."
Yeah. I mean, I think if you go back to Bob McNair's, in God rest his soul, his famous quote, and I think he was misquoted at the time. But I think his background and everything like that, being from South Carolina, I think people would never really, would only take the stereotype of what they thought he would be like. But when he said the inmates running the asylum type comment, what I think he said in truth, and it's the same in any organization, you can't really let mid-level employees make strategic decisions, because that's not what they're employed to do. But at the same time, we've got to remember Watson is the lone jewel in our crown at the minute, and the only reason, or one of the reasons, why Nick Caserio is here. But there's not many after him, so I think you have to feel him engaged. I think Albert Breer tweeted out today from the guy that writes the MMQB column each Monday, former NFL Network guy. He said, look, the issue is Cal or whoever it was said to him, we will do something, and they didn't. They did the opposite of that. So, and that's what it comes back to. I think sometimes simple things like picking up the phone and saying, look, Deshaun, things have moved quickly, because I can guarantee you Bob Lamont was on the phone, or he was pressing Cal via Easterby and said, look, if Nick moves off to because he referenced that at the start, he had a lot of options. So that's obviously been hammered home. He felt like he had to say that again. So Lamont's probably said, look, we've got options. I can't guarantee that if we leave here today without signing something or agreeing something in principle, we don't come back. And that's on what every good agent would do. But I think the fact that it came about so quickly like that, then it just makes you kind of wonder how pressing the decision that needed to be made was. But there's a lot more out there to be discussed. And I think this all hinges on getting the head coach right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and like I said, I just think you hit the nail on the hammer. That it sounds like it was just made off of just impulse. It was they basically did an old sales tactic called the Jones effect. You don't want to be the last person to get something. You want to be the first. You want to be the guy that gets Nick Caserio. And I bet Deshaun Watson's mad. I think these trade rumors are just ridiculous. There's no one who bleeds Houston like Deshaun Watson. The man has put this team on his back. He could be unhappy all he wants. Many stars have always been unhappy.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean they just have to go ahead and quit and ask for a trade.
Yeah, I mean, people forget. Andrew Johnson didn't want to be here for probably the last 2 years of his career. When they were beating the playoffs in the divisional round, he went straight the next morning to ask for a trade. And I think it's not uncommon for players to be happy or unhappy. The timing of the unhappiness rumors, though, I think it's hard not to think you're smelling a rat when you think about the timing of it, because ultimately, if you don't have those Deshaun rumors, the focus on the Easterby element increased, and it actually gave an additional angle for reporters to go after today rather than that. So I don't know who's leaked that. It was Mike Florio on NBC Pro Football Talk that put out that article yesterday. It creates clicks. It's a great story. You can get. I saw a story on CBS today about the top 12 destinations for Deshaun if he is to be traded. And for everybody watching, the Houston Texans aren't going to trade Deshaun Watson. That's not going to happen. It just as simply isn't going to go happen. You'd be better moving the franchise before you did that. And we've all been, we've been through that before with the Oilers, and it's not a place, if you speak to many guys before my time watching this team, but people don't want to go back to that, and it still hurts, in a lot of places for a certain generation of Houston sports fans, and I feel that every time I'm there. So I think he's not going to get traded. Everybody, and look at the end of the day, right? Deshaun is exactly the same. Who's the Scottish twat? And that's me. Let's turn up for what podcast? But I think that you've got to remember, he's like you and I and everybody watching this, and everybody, there's been unbelievable amount of stuff on Twitter in the last couple of days, more than was probably in 3 or 4 weeks of the season combined. And Deshaun just wants to win. And if Caserio can sit him down, like he said, when he returns from Cabo, and he speaks to him and says, lays out a plan, this is how we're going to win, these are my steps to get us out of this trouble, are you on board? And the answer is going to be yes, because he's got no choice, really, I think, ultimately, because the team's not going to trade him. It's not the NBA. You can't, the stars don't rule the roost in the same way as they do in the National Football League.
No, I mean, I completely agree. None that thought never crossed my mind. But there is one coach we haven't really talked about. One coach who I think is the furthest away from the Patriots' way, and that's Joe Brady. I think there's a real good possibility that that you might see Joe Brady called in plays, next season for the Texans.
I think there's an opportunity. I mean, I would probably, if you do bring Joe Brady, I think you explore the option of getting himself as an assistant head coach or something like that, so he has a promotional title, so he can move him from the OC there. Would he like to come? If you're him at this point of his career, can you bring him in and benefit Deshaun in the offensive scheme next year? Because you're likely not going to invest much more in this team, because I think all the money is going to have to be redistributed to correct this ailing defense. So he could come in. I just think there's too much inexperience there at the stage of his career. Like he would only be the second youngest head coach ever in the league after their his name. What's his name? And
Sean McVay.
Sean McVay, yeah, exactly. So McVay was the youngest. Kyle Shanahan would have been the youngest when he was here, and you kind of let him go off your coaching staff. So if you take that example, you think, well, maybe you should bring him back and give him a chance, because you kind of let a young up-and-coming play caller disappear out of your building. And shout out to Matt Schaub, who had one of his best years, just retired this week. But he had his best year under Kyle Shanahan. We probably should have known at that point that the guy was something special because he didn't put up those numbers, and we've not seen those numbers until this season when Deshaun finally broke the passing and the touchdown a single season records.
Oh, and just, I completely agree. Shout out to Matt Schaub. What a baller he was. What a baller Matt Schaub was. But I think what excites me about Joe Brady is that the fact that in Carolina he was able to get 4 players over the 1,000-yard mark. You know, Robbie Anderson was a beast, a surprise. From the New York Jets. DJ Moore, as we know, is an absolute animal. Curtis Samuel had 1,000 all-purpose yards. No CMC, so Mike Davis also had 1,000 purpose yards. I think the fact that he got a lot of people involved, and also he had Teddy Bridgewater, who has no cartilage between his knees, and at one point Teddy Bridgewater was looking like a top 15 quarterback, and I could only fathom what he could do with the Deshaun Watson. Now, we talked about this before. I think Brady is you hiring him based off potential. The potential that he could be the next Sean McVay, the potential that he could be the next great coach in the NFL.
Yeah, look, he's a young mind, and somebody will do it at some point. If it's not in this coaching hire, he might stay there another year, and possibly he's limited out what he can do in that offense. But I think that they've got an opportunity to take a risk. I think within the backdrop of taking a risk already, going back to the Patriots with Caserio, then I think potentially you're setting yourself up for yet more backlash. Ultimately, the one I in my head, I think if you think on Leftwich at Tampa Bay, and Brady was referenced about his process from Caserio. Does he pick up the phone to him and ask Brady's opinion on Leftwich and as a potential option? Because I think you've seen Brady at a late stage of his career move franchise, go down to Tampa Bay and still put up numbers and get them to the playoffs, albeit needing a win in week 17, but he did that. So he's a minority coach. These guys have not been given a chance for whatever reason, and he might be well an option as well. So there's plenty of options out there for it. I think they've got to go offensive head coach because you need your team to be focused around that because that's where your best player lies. But you've got to hope in the next couple of days. I think if anything comes out of this, you want to see a more varied candidate list come through. And they're going to have to be really, because they've only really interviewed Joe Brady at this point and nobody else really serious apart from some of the old guard that are probably not in contention to bring anybody in. But yeah, I think there's a lot of twists in this tail left to go until the head coach comes in. I wouldn't be surprised if this takes a wee bit longer than we thought. When Caserio was hired so quickly, it appeared certainly that it would be a quick hire from the head coach. But I think they're going to just pump the brakes on that process slightly and maybe try and find the right head coach for them. And I'm reading between the lines, I think they'll have an idea of who they want. But certainly from the press conference today, it didn't feel like they were the way they were spoken with any conviction that they've got exactly the guy who they're looking for right now.
And that's what I love. I love that they're not just really going to come in and just say, okay, now we're going to hire our head coach the next day. I love that Nick Caserio is going to be the one interviewing, these head coaches. But first, shout out to Willie Borby. Thank you for the super chat of $5. My biggest takeaway from this is Watson was mainly upset because he wasn't asked before they took a GM. Mcnair fixes this by being professional with him. Yeah, we talked about it before that it was kind of a move off an impulse. That he didn't want to lose Nick Caserio, and that's why he's gone. But there's another topic that we have to discuss. You mentioned earlier that a lot of our assets need to be put on the defense. So what do you do with Will Fuller then? Because he's gonna demand a contract. He himself might want a pretty sizable one. I think the Texans fans need to have understanding that there could be a season next year and Will Fuller is not on the Houston Texans.
I think there is a possibility of that, but I think when you put it in the context of Easterby, I don't necessarily think that you're going to let another of his trusted weapons out the building and let somebody come in and ask him to redefine chemistry. Again, you saw that with Brandon Cooks this season. It grew as the time went on, but it took time. And when Will Fuller went out the team, and I think if you go back to that touchdown against Detroit on Thanksgiving, where he dropped it in a bucket from 40-odd yards into the back of the end zone, Fuller, that's probably one of the best schematic, poetry kind of touchdowns that you could, if you want to draw it up on the whiteboard, and that's what you want it to look like. There's not many times in this current offense you've seen that just happen exactly how you'd like. So I don't think within the backdrop you could risk letting Fuller go. I think there's, if you have to franchise him, you do so. There's probably a number of options out there. It's going to be a reasonably crowded wide receiver market this year. I think no more so than Allen Robinson, who we saw burn us in Chicago in week 15. I think he's going to command big money unless he's franchise tagged. So it's quite a crowded market. I think that'll suppress Fuller's value. Fuller's value will be suppressed again because of his PED suspension. So unless he wants to leave and take a prove-it deal, I think you can maybe get a 2 to 3 year deal worked out with him and keep him on this roster. Now, the biggest issue, and I think the reason why Caserio is here, is because he understands the salary cap, and he'll need to go out and he'll need to work out in this roster. I think the two big unknowns of this is Whitney Merciless. Can you get him to retire because he just doesn't look like a player anymore, and his talents have faded badly. You and I have talked about that before. And what can you do with Nick Martin? How much can you? There's still a $5-6 million saving, even if you take the dead cap hit. So there's a number of options that we'll need to explore. But there's a lot of guys on that defense that you could get rid of tomorrow, and I don't think we'll necessarily see a downward slump play. Even if you got a third of the cost for a lot of these guys, it's the worst defense we've ever rolled out. So I'm not too precious about who you replace them with. You just need to get solid fundamental pros that are going to come in and do their job. But yeah, it's going to be a balance. But I fully expect Fuller to be back, because I just don't think Deshaun or the franchise can take another one of these incidents, because it feels like there's been about 6 in the last 2 days. But you never know. You just never know at this stage, right?
Yeah, I would love to keep Fuller because I've been a fan of him since he got drafted from Notre Dame. My only thing is, of course, I would love him back, but if if he wants too much money, I think you don't bulge, and I think if he wants too much, then I think you have to let him go. You can't spend any more resource that you already have on this offense, and another reason why that I don't really mind losing Fuller if he asks for too much is because of Brandon Cooks. It's because of the potential Kiki Kuti and Chad Hansen. Whether you want to buy into his stock or not. I just think there's a possibility on that.
I think week 17 there was 2 incidents. Despite he had 166 yards, he showed the potential to be a very productive receiver. The chemistry going with Deshaun, but there was 2 big plays. One in the back of the end zone, right on the half. Didn't get his feet in bounds. Well, it probably did, but again, it was adjudged to be out of bounds. And then he dropped a ball in the final drive. We ended up settling for a field goal. 2 big moments, either side of the half, that he wasn't there to be counted for. Now, he's not as quick as he was. I think if Brandon Cooks is here next year, it's going to have to be on a restructured deal. You're going to have to reduce that $12 million cap hit, and you're going to have to find a way to re-engineer your cap around him. If he wants to stay, he's going to have to take a cut, because I think a lot of the balls he caught this year were speed outs, quick crossers, all these kind of stuff that you could probably get, a middle tier guy like a Robbie Anderson guy. He went for $10 million, a 3-year deal to Carolina. He talked about in Brady's system. So there's cheaper options than that $12 million cap for what he's been asked to do. If I had to choose, I would probably take Fuller over Cooks, but I think you need to find somebody, and I don't know if this is a role for Kahale Waring, but we need a big bodied guy who can go up, box out guys like Darren Fells did well 2 years ago in the end zone. We need somebody who can go and make those big catches when we need a play, and we've not seen that. We've not had enough go-to, and we've struggled in the red zone. So we need bigger bodies, I think, to try and dominate in those tight areas that present themselves in the red zone.
So what would you do about Zach Ertz?
Well, I think he's leaving Philadelphia because he was in tears, wasn't he? So again, it's a question of cost, isn't it? I think you could apply the Fuller argument right there that he might not necessarily be affordable because you've got Tunsil and Watt taking up a huge percentage of your salary cap right there. So I think it's over 60 odd million those 2 guys will pick up in money against the cap. So yeah, there's a lot. I mean, look, the issue is, and I think that the irony is, you're asking Nick Caserio to do a lot this off season, and I think
Yes.
people probably have to get comfortable. You probably have to go in and get comfortable with the fact that you just can't do probably even half of what you'd like to achieve to get us back to even a 2018 level of defense. We're probably 3 years away from that, so we're probably going to have to. We will be another season where it's offensive led, but how much we just patch up the defense not to be the disaster that it was last year and just get some turnovers. And I think the fact only create 9 turnovers, we've got a chance to make sure that we've got a chance just by coincidence alone there'll be more turnovers next year.
Yes, sir. 95 people deep in the NHL. I think we're doing a good job so far. So before I let you go, gun to your head, $1 million on the table. Who was the next Texans head coach? Who do you say?
If you had to bet $1 million, if we're sitting in Vegas right now in the sportsbook, you stick that on. You stick that probably on Brian Daboll, just because I think Bob Lamont's running the show. Lamont's been here. Lamont was Rick Smith's agent, a long-standing relationship with the Mcnair family. I can't see them going any other. Well, I can't see them going other ways. I think there may be a wild card. If you had to put the $1 million and you're looking for a decent return, then I think Daboll's going to be the one. If it was me, as I said, Arthur Smith, because he's been around guys like Munchak who know how to coach offensive line. He understands schematics. The previous coach was a tight end. That you've seen that he understands the line of scrimmage and motion and all these things and how they can affect the back end. So I think that one and number 2. But look, you never know. There could be somebody completely out. You've seen former Texans DB Aaron Glenn get is still a DB coach in New Orleans, but he's been asked to interview in New York for the Jets. So I think it could go away. What about you? What about you, Ruben? What do you think?
It's hard, man, but if you ask me, I think it's Joe Brady. Now, if it's Brian Daboll or Joe Brady, I'm happy. I know what I'm expecting, but I think there's a lot of buzz around Joe Brady. I think the possibility of Nick Caserio being in the interview with Joe Brady, it has to tell you something. One thing I do like about Daboll is that apparently him and Bill Belichick really don't like each other. That they respect each other, but they have, they're not fond of each other. And I think that's what I am more leaning to. Who I want is Brian Daboll, but I feel like it's going to be Joe Brady.
Yeah, I mean, it could go anyway. I think, I mean, if you think back to where we were, some 90 minutes ago before the media availability, do you feel like you know any more about Caserio or Easterby or any of that? Or effectively, business as usual right now, I would suggest.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just going to relate to see what we could do. And then I think you hit it right on the head. I think we're going to be expecting a lot from Caserio. And honestly, I think we should uphold those expectations, because this dude, you are now in charge of the most important hire in franchise history. You're either going to send this team to the promised land and compete for Super Bowls, or you're going to send us into the gulag and we become the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, and I think that the sentiment from fans, and look, I think you've got to remember there's a lot more of Texans. You've got a lot of people who buy their season ticket, will buy their season ticket regardless what goes on. They'll buy merchandise, and it's like somebody put in the chat there that, and the only way Mcnair will understand that is money. And I think he did understand it this year when you only had 13,300 tickets to sell and they weren't sold out because people, you can't tailgate. You don't want to, you just got to get in the stadium, watch the game, whether Matt's gone and leave. And, that might well be the case again, for some of next year. We don't know. So there might be an opportunity for people to voice that again when it's single game tickets, when they're not selling season tickets. Then I think that's that's an opportunity for us. Just like it is an opportunity for the media today to press home the severity of where people view Cal and his running of the franchise. And the overall sentiment that most people had was prior to this, were you in isolation, uncomfortable with the hire of Nick Caserio? The answer is unequivocally no, because he's got a great resume. But it's the clunkiness of the process, the way in which it's been done. There's too many leaks to the media, And we know probably more coming out of that building now than we've ever done. And those leaks align with the fact or the time period that Jack Easterby's been in this building. So, I if you gave me that $1 million again to go to Vegas, I'd quite comfortably put that $1 million on Easterby dropping that rumor in about Watson today, because it took some of the heat off him. And I think he's here to stay. So we've just got to sort of strap ourselves in and get comfortable with that. As long as he's not near personnel, that's where the damage has been done, partly, and that's where he's co-signed off. And I think, but also the damage has been done is by the culture and the mistrust, that was brought up in the Sports Illustrated article. So if people want to see Easterby done, I think the hashtags are great, and it's obviously it's getting to the media, it's making its way to its team. But the only person that really is going to get Easterby at the building is number 4. And if he goes in and says this guy brings a toxic culture, he's not welcome in the locker room, people don't trust him, and he says that outright to Cal and Nick Caserio, that's our only chance you'll see the back of him.
Do you think he does? Because I thought about the same thing, and I also thought about, well, who is Cal Mcnair going to choose? Him, Jack Easterby, or Deshaun Watson?
I think Cal's not a smart man. He's been born into a life of privilege via Enron dollars, and it just so happened that his father bought a football team and brought pro football back to Houston. He has just been in this situation by birthright, and he's not grafted to this point. So I think Cal, there's only probably one person that Easterby and Cal would turn, there's only one person that could get Cal and Caserio to turn their back on Easterby, and I think that's Deshaun, because he's truly indispensable. Because we've waited 20 years to have a quarterback like Deshaun. You could wait 20 years again once he hangs it up to get another one, if not longer. There's not many like him. So when you get one of these guys, you need to treat it in a way that it's that how rare a find it is. And I think that's probably Deshaun's thing, because you saw that on the clip on NFL Films where they're walking off the field, JJ taps him on the back and says, "Sorry, we've wasted one of your years." And this is finite, this stuff. You've got a championship window. We've just been so badly run, we're now not in a championship window. Caserio's job is a 2-3 year rebuild to get us back to that position where we can maybe go to Kansas City, we can go to Baltimore in maybe 2 to 3 years' time and fancy a chance to take a result. But until Watson goes in and unequivocally says that this guy's detrimental to winning, and I'm only here for winning, that's probably the only way. So maybe some donations to his foundation with a Fire Easterby tagline on the end of it. Maybe that's a way to get down. But I think the players see it, the media see it, and it's just unfortunate. I think that's been overall, kind of sentiment from today. It's just unfortunate that Cal's in over his head. He wants just to pay people to run the team, and him just to take a step back. But he needs to understand that there's a lot, there's a finite time you've got in this league. It stands for not for long. You've got to take the opportunities that you've done. You've messed up his rookie contract, so he's the man. I think really he's the only man that can get it done. But I think on a Sunday, does he convert your third down? Does he does he not have a play on fourth down in Kansas City in the playoffs? The biggest issue on this team has been coaching and personnel decisions. So if he's not involved in that, the only way he's up, because it probably can't be any worse than it's been in the last 2 years.
I agree. I hope Watson does that. I think that cures it all, honestly. I think if Easterby gone and it's just Cal Mcnair and Nick Caserio, and Cal Mcnair gives them the keys to the kingdom, like apparently he said he's going to do, then that's what you want. Then hey, no harm, no foul. I think we're on a good roll. The fact that he's still here does question me, but everything just remains to be seen. So last question of the day: what could Nick Caserio do? His first move, well, we know, is cutting Greg Mance. But what do you think he could do to give a kind of a hope to the fans? Mine's always going to be he just tells the Easterby, just get out of here. But that doesn't sound like it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, Greg Mance is a funny one, because I think he looked, that season in Martin. He's a great center. Started every game, didn't give up a single sack all year in 2016. He got his bell rung with a bad concussion in week 4 last year against Carolina, and he's not quite like the same guy since. He was was, a big locker room guy, and I think people mentioned that after that he wasn't quite the same hype in the locker room. So I think that's obviously taken a toll on him, and it's a shame because he was injured coming out of Toledo. It looked like he'd maybe got an undrafted gem, and that's probably what Caserio's only comes down to. I think, can you get 3 or 4 starters, or at least role players from undrafted free agents? How well can you pick up the late round picks, and how well can you just coach a defense to do it? I think the Caserio's most important thing in year one is getting coaches who can get guys to play disciplined football and not shoot their gaps like Tyrell Adams does every week, like Zach Cunningham's done every week. It's just learn how to read the play and just play fundamentally sound football. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing. And I think he really held on to those one score things. He talked about it. Cal talked about it. Caserio talked about it. So they think they're on the cusp of being able to find results just by better coaching, and they're probably right in that. But that probably only gets you to 7 and 9, 8 and 8 at best. So I think a 9 and 7 seasons probably it wasn't enough to get you in the playoffs this year. If you offered me that now, on the basis of you just draft well, maybe bring in some seasoned veterans, at decent prices in the second and third wave of free agency, you'd probably take that into account.
I agree. Now, I think we hit a banger today. Let the fans know where they can find you.
Yeah, you can check it out. It's the Turn Up for What podcast. It's at Podcast Texans on Twitter and Facebook, at podcasttexans.com. Just got an article about Cal Mcnair, despite, I think it was very pertinent the day before, and it even became more so the fact that today should be a good positive day, that you and I are looking ahead to a lot of things, but ultimately we've still got to fix the mistakes of the last 18 months before we can take a step forward. I include Easterby firing, but I don't think that's going to happen. So let's see what Caserio can do on the personnel side of this, and let's hope we just get a really sound and fundamental coaching staff across both sides of the ball, and at least it'll be a step forward for us all, I think, in 2021.
For sure. Let's hope. And guys, thank y'all for watching. I don't know what to say. I don't know how I feel. I could easily say this was great, or I could easily say this was bad. Cal Mcnair did us no favors, but I think having someone like Nick Caserio, I think it's good. I do like him. But thank you guys for watching. Almost at 3,000 subscribers. Feel free to hit us up. Also check out the podcast, Space City Sportscast. But as always, guys, y'all have a very